When I was a child, there was an expression that was used often, a simple children's rhyme, one that we now know to not be true. I bet many of you can complete the sentence with me. Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. Or some of you said harm me. Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. And we know that that's actually not true. Words matter. They can build someone up, and they can result in a tremendous amount of pain. The right words can heal relationships and tend to sore egos. They can also alienate and other and torment and incite violence. According to the words of the Torah, the very creation of the world began with words. Vayomer Elohim, and God said. I think one of my favorite, or one of the favorite lines for my wife from the Torah, which is kind of from the Torah, it's really words in Aramaic, is that when a magician does a magic trick, what do they say? Abracadabra. And one explanation for the source of these words is that it's actually Aramaic. It comes from abra kedabra. I will create as I speak. Now you know something that you probably didn't know before. Abracadabra, abracadabra, that our words can build and create. In the Torah, every word matters. For several millennia, rabbis, scholars, and just the regular Amcha, the average Jill and Joe, have pored over each and every word in the text, trying to understand them and use them to inspire communities to act for good, and as a way to know God and to connect to the divine spirit. Of course, these words have also been used to defend abhorrent individual and communal behavior. And as such, we must be very careful with our words, and particularly careful with these words in the Torah and how we read them. Our Torah portion last week, Ekev, began with the instruction to listen. V'haya ekev tishma'un. This week, our parsha is called Re'eh, an instruction to see. And if you want to join me, if you've opened it up to page 1061, a careful reading of the opening line prompts many questions. In our English translation here, it says, "See, this day I set before you blessing and curse. Blessing if you obey the commandments of the Lord, your God, that I enjoin upon you this day, and curse if you do not obey the commandments of the Lord your God." Now the rabbis saw these words, and their imagination started to flow. Anytime there's a change in the grammar, or what might be perceived as an error, the rabbinic imagination really does go wild. And here, for those of you who can understand the Hebrew words, there is something particularly peculiar with the first four of them. Because it says re'eh, to see. But re'eh here is written in the singular. You shall see, a commandment to see, but it's spoken to one person. If it was in the plural, it would have said something like re'u, but it says re'eh. But then it goes on to say, Anochi noten lifnechem, that I am placing before you in the plural. So why the change? Why do we go from the singular to the plural? There's another famous case in the Torah where this happens. This moment is when the children of Israel arrive to Mount Sinai. And there it says, Vayichan Sham Yisrael Vayichan is in the singular. There he encamped, it seems to say. But it says Yisrael, the children of Israel, the people. Rashi brings down, the medieval commentator Rashi brings down a really beautiful and I think quite well-known teaching on these words, that in that moment when they encamped at Mount Sinai, Vayichan Sham Yisrael, that there they camped, Ki ish echad belev echad. With one person, as one person, with one heart. That at that moment, there was unity among the Jewish people. They were like one person with one heart. The part that often gets left out, though, is that the commentary continues, and Rashi says, Aval shal kol hachaniyot b'taromot u'machloket. But in every other stop along their way, as our ancestors made our way through the desert, there was a spirit of murmuring and dissension. In other words, we argued with each other, right? It wasn't clear that everybody was on the same page. They were trying to figure out how to build this new community. And so they argued. There was disagreement. In the book of Exodus, the unity of the people is what is emphasized. So what about here? What about in this case, where we have a similar, what could be perceived as an error, but of course we read it as every word having meaning? So I want to offer two explanations that are brought by Rabbi Elimelech of Lezhansk, a founder and early member of the Hasidic movement who died in the 1780s. So lived a long time ago. He understands the use of the singular re'eh to be connected to the Torah's deep understanding of spiritual psychology. Of course, he probably wouldn't have used the word spiritual psychology, but that's what he sees in this. He explains that there are two kinds of motivations that exist. Two lights that cause people to do good. And he says two different kinds of lights that exist in order to inspire people towards doing good, and is written in this Torah parsha this week, as we mentioned before, to walk in God's footsteps. The first motivation, he says, is yirah, fear, and in particular, fear of punishment. Fear of what is wrong, and what is re'eh, seen as doing wrong. Noam Elimelech says that when it comes to punishment, the curse referred to these opening lines, one doesn't necessarily see the punishment in order to avoid it, and often the warning can be enough. That when it comes to trying to do the right thing, sometimes we don't actually need to know if you do the wrong thing, this is what will happen, but rather just being warned. The second motivation, he says, is ahava, the motivation of love. We perform acts of kindness and care for people out of a feeling of love. Noam Elimelech says that for love to exist, for that muscle to be flexed, for it to be most effective, we have to see the object of our love. Right? My kids have been away from me for most of the summer, and I think about them and I love them and it's there all the time. But when I get to see them quickly on FaceTime, or I got to see them in person for a few days, the love just rushes back in a different way. There's something about seeing the object of our love. So as we prepare for the high holidays, as we've said, tomorrow we are entering the last month of the year. It's a good moment to ask ourselves, what motivates us? What motivates you to do good in the world? Are you the kind of person that acts out of fear or pressure of maybe deadlines or what other people will think, or maybe a punishment or external pressure? Or are you the kind of person that tends to act more out of love or a desire to complete something for someone? And I ask you this question not necessarily seeing it as a right or wrong. I'm sure we're all going to say, oh, I'm the love kind. I do things out of love. But the reality is that that's not always true. for everyone. We've seen over the last few months a shift in the Israeli government's policy around humanitarian aid going into Gaza. And we can think about that shift in exactly one of these two ways. We can think of it as, is the shift of ensuring human rights and dignity for Palestinian civilians is a humanitarian aid that's, by the way, despite what you're seeing in the media, is coming in truckload after truckload after truckload. And of course, there is still lots of suffering and lots of logistical challenges that need to be overcome. But is this food coming because of a fear of the negative consequences, of concern about international pressure? Or is this happening out of a love for all human beings? Because all human beings, as we say in the Torah, are in God's image and deserve human dignity and access to food and drinking water, which are essential to maintaining that dignity. I want to think that it's hopefully out of both, about doing the right thing, but especially out of love for all human beings, even and maybe especially when it is so hard to do so, especially when so much of the pain and the heartache really does fall under Hamas's responsibility. There was a petition that came out this week, an open letter, signed by a group of Orthodox rabbis that say, we see the pain and the suffering. And these group of Orthodox rabbis, both living in Israel and in North America, said we have to actually say something. And connected to this week's Torah portion, they write, this moment demands a different voice, one grounded in our deepest Jewish values and informed by our traumatic history of being victims of persecution. They say Orthodox Jewry, some of Israel's most devoted supporters, bears a unique moral responsibility. We must affirm that Judaism's vision of justice and compassion extends to all human beings. Our tradition teaches, they say, that every person is created b'tselem Elokim in the divine image. We are the spiritual descendants of Abraham, who have chosen to walk, as we said in this week's Parsha, in the path of Hashem to do righteousness and justice. And they say allowing an entire people to starve stands in stark contrast to this teaching. And I think this is what Rabbi Noam Elimelech means when he says that the word re'eh is united here. That we have to see suffering and pain, even if it is so hard to look, even if we don't believe that we are to blame, we have to look. And this idea of fear and ahava, of yirah and ahava, fear and love, have to unite together to cause us to do what needs to be done. The word ahava, love, has the same numerical value in Hebrew to the word echad, to one, singular. A second interpretation that Rabbi Noam Elimelech offers for why re'eh is written in the singular, because although we have communal responsibility, we also have individual responsibility. And it is our obligation every single day to wake up every single morning and to say, what's my job in the world? How do I bring more peace, more love, more unity into this world? We ended our Torah portion this week with another word for seeing. This time the word is yira'eh. 3 times a year our ancestors would journey to Jerusalem and they would bring with them gifts, their bikurim, their choice fruit, and they would bring it with them and enjoy it there in Jerusalem. And there it says to be seen, yira'eh. The Torah commands each and every one of us to be seen with our goodness, to be seen with the gifts that we have brought into this world. So I'll leave you with the following question. As we prepare for this brand new Jewish year, what have you done these last few months, this year? What are the ways in which you have walked in God's footsteps? What blessings have you brought into the world? Who are you helping? And what is the work that you as individuals and we as a community yet have to do? Mazal tov to all of those of you who are celebrating today, and I wish you a Shabbat Shalom.